Hi everybody, thanks for stopping by to stitch with me today. It's a cold day here in central Pennsylvania. Fabulous for stitching, staying inside and stitching. Last time I checked it was 10 degrees outside. Now we were fortunate enough where I live, which is not far from Hershey Park, about, I don't know, half hour, 45 minutes, depending on the traffic, and about an hour from Harrisburg, east of that. So we were lucky that we're far enough west of the snowstorm so that we didn't get a lot of snow, but boy, oh boy, did we get the cold. It is frigid, totally frigid out there. I decided I'm not going outside until the temperature is higher than my age. So, in all honesty, that's gonna be quite a while. But like I said, we were lucky that we didn't get everything that the people east of us and north of us have gotten. So I hope all of you can stay warm and be safe in the frigid weather out there. Today I'm working on, and I'm sorry, I think I keep bumping this camera, so I'm wobbling a little bit here. I'll try to stay over far enough so that I don't do that. Today I'm working on A Long Winter's Nap. It's by Heaven and Earth Designs, and I'm doing the Christmas stocking, and I hope to get this finished in time for next Christmas for my granddaughter. Oh, my husband must have hit the wrong button on the... I hear the car beeping. And with any amount of luck, and if I can stitch fast enough, I'm also hoping to get this one done for my grandson till next Christmas. But that might be a stretch, but we're sure gonna try. I started this one on the 18th of December. Did it again. Sorry, folks. On the 18th of December. So this is my third week on it. And I really have just over to here to go till I finish the first row of pages. So it's coming along nicely, and it's actually progressing faster than I thought it would. The most time-consuming part is starting all the new threads and ending off all the old threads and putting them back on my board, but you know, it's all part of the process, and I really love the process. Now, not to say that I don't also love to have finishes, because I most certainly do. But I also totally enjoy the process, and I totally enjoy this method of stitching on the diagonal. So, Blitz Stitch, Brian, thank you so very much for putting that initial video up, because because that's what inspired me to do this. And thank you to my best friend Barb, who started using your method. And I was having a hard time wrapping my head around going vertically the way she does, and Brian the way you do. But the challenge was I wasn't going to let her beat me, so to speak. And I know, Barb, I already told you about this, and we laughed about it, but it was like, no, that's not going to get the best of me. I'm going to figure out a way that works for me, and which I did, and I totally love it. And I really don't know how I would stitch a Heaven and Earth design any other way at this point. Because doing it any other way, I would get terribly, terribly confused and miss stitches and make mistakes. I mean, not that we don't have some mistakes this way, but doing it this way, you catch them right away. I did have on my last video a woman who asked, must you use like a scroll frame? At least this is how I understood her question. Must you use a scroll frame and stitch two-handed in order to use this method of diagonal stitching and parking? To which my best answer to that is, no, you don't. You don't have to. Okay, one, two. Sorry, folks, I kind of lost my place here. Nope, that should be there, so I parked something wrong. This one is wrong. I'm not sure what I did there, so we're just gonna kind of, for now, get this one out of the way. And I'm gonna, oh, okay, that one is right. Okay, I have myself a little confused. No, this one is right. I see. We're gonna get this one out of the way. Anyway, what was I talking about? I just can't see myself stitching a Heaven and Earth design any other way, because I really, as you see, you do get confused every little once in a while. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I tried to wait for this video until I got down to a spot where my color changes weren't as crazy as what they were up in here when I was doing his eyes. That was a little hair-raising, and not because it was difficult, but because it was starting a thread from one color and ending it, and then starting another thread and doing 2 stitches and ending it, because they weren't really used anyplace else. Please pardon my bumping this thing. I really Wanted to get it close enough so that you can see, but tried to keep it back far enough so that I wouldn't bump it, and now I keep bumping it. So I do apologize for that. 1, 2, 3, 4. Anyway, I know what I was saying. A woman asked about, do you have to use a scroll frame and stitch two-handed in order to stitch this way? And the short answer is no. There's lots of people out there who stitch on Q-snaps and do quite nicely. My friend stitches on a Q-snap and holds that in her hand. She doesn't. Sometimes she uses a lap stand, but when she's here stitching with me, we just sit at the table and she holds it, and I have my little set up here with my Kay's Creation stand and my scrolls, and we stitch away. There's people, if you read the Facebook group, that stitch on the diagonal or even columns or what have you, and park, and they're using a hoop. So it really is all what you prefer to do. You know, really, folks, it's a hobby. Have fun, enjoy, find your joy, and stitch that way. And there's no hard and fast rule that says you have to do one way or the other. Just do what you like, do what you enjoy. Okay. Pardon me, I have to concentrate a little bit here because it's still in an area of a lot of color changes. But kind of is what it is. So we'll keep going. Thought I'd share today just a little bit about how I started cross-stitching. I had, I always joke back in the cave days when I graduated from nursing school. My very first job was in a state hospital, where here in Pennsylvania, state hospitals were and still are mental institutions. So I spent the first 15 years of my career working as a psychiatric nurse. That's a whole story in itself. But at the time, I got a job at the state hospital in an adolescent unit. So I worked with kids that were 13 to 18 years old, and a lot of them, their diagnosis was failure to cope. So failure to cope at that time is they just had a hard time adjusting to their environment, to their family life. Just for an example, I had a 15-year-old young man who still carried around his teddy bear, and mainly because mommy just babied him so much and didn't want him to grow up, to the point where she was actually still bathing him. And of course he would then act out and get into behavioral situations which weren't, I didn't want to stitch that yet, which weren't the best choices for him. One being fortunately it wasn't a passenger train, but he put stuff on the railroad track and actually was party to derailing a train. So that's the kind of kids that we took care of. But anyway, I worked with a nursing assistant who, now I live in central Pennsylvania. Lancaster County is just a smidge south of me. And in Lancaster County is a place called the Ephrata Cloisters, which was a religious settlement at the time. And it's still open. You can take tours and do all that kind of stuff. And she was over there one day and bought some 22 count hardhanger fabric and brought some into work, and she was cross-stitching with it. So of course I was Mrs. Goo Goo Gaga as to, oh my, what is that? And she told me where she got it, and she showed me what she was doing and how to do it, and it was like, wow, that's not so hard. I mean, really, seriously, you just sew in an X. I mean, now I had been a person that I grew up always having some kind of craft. My mother taught me to knit when I was very, very young, in elementary school. I'm going to say maybe 6 or 7 years old. One Christmas I remember making huck towels for my grandmothers and my aunts. So I always, I did that knit knobby thing where you have the spool with the nails on it and make the cording. I had yards and yards and yards of the cording. Never did anything with it, but sure was fun to sit on the front porch or wherever and make the cording. So I did that. So I was always doing something. Oh my, I am so sorry. That was a really big bump. So she showed me, and I said, oh, that looks like it would be fun. Next time you go over there, would you get me some? So she did. And a couple days later, she brought a yard of 22 count hardhanger fabric to work for me. And I went, okay, thank you so much. I paid her for it and said, thanks so much. Went home and figured, okay, this is not difficult. Now, what can I stitch with this? Or stitch on this? Because there really wasn't, at that time, I'll give away my age a little bit. It was back in the early 70s. So it was really hard to find stuff at that time, to find patterns at that time. And it just so happened I had gotten a Better Homes and Garden magazine that had some charts in for some cross stitch. And it was like, whoa, 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 this is pretty great. I can try these. And it was, it was pictures of the 4 seasons. So there was one picture for each season of the year. So my challenge was to teach myself how to stitch. So that's what I started with. 22 count one strand of floss, started at on the bottom right hand corner, and away I went. And after that, the rest was history because I was hooked. So that's how I started. Do I have those little pieces anymore? I have no clue what happened to them. They're long lost somewhere in who knows where land. But it was fun and I enjoyed it, and stitched off and on for quite a few years. I worked at that state hospital for 15 years. And then I left just because things got so different. The young adult unit had closed, and I went to work in the main building, which, I mean, that was well, first I actually went to work on a geriatric ward, which that was fine, and I enjoyed that. And actually that's where I met my now sister-in-law, who insisted I meet her brother, and that's a whole nother story for another day. And we've now been married for 36 years. But I left there. I went part-time after my daughter was born, and then I left for the simple reason that treatment had changed. And because of the philosophies and the way the treatments were changing, there were a lot of nurses that were getting hurt. There was a time when I first started that if you had somebody come in who was, say, psychotic or schizophrenic or whatever, and they were actively aggressive, what we did, or what the doctors did, was had us give a certain dose of medication every hour on the hour until that person was asleep. Then as they came around, he calculated how much medicine it took to pretty much zonk them. And then we started that as a daily dose. 1, 2, 3. And then from that daily dose, it was gradually decreased as the person became more accessible and we could work with them and treat them. So, people weren't getting hurt. However, that changed. And new medicines came out, which was a good thing. I mean, that wasn't all bad. New medicines came out, and what the doctors then did is, to me, was more inhumane than the way we did it to begin when I first started working there. What the doctors would do now, at that point then, was to give them a very small dose of medication and then put them in seclusion. Well, only my opinion, but what that seemed to do was agitate people even more because they were angry that they were locked in a seclusion room. It just made matters worse, and then because of that, people got hurt. And I just didn't think that was fair. So I eventually, after 15 years, left. And what I did is I had a needle workshop for a short period of time, a couple of years, which was really a lot of fun. And I really, really did enjoy it, except I did a good enough business to keep the shop going. But in the long run, it wasn't a good enough business to make a decent profit. And by that point in time, we had a daughter who at that point was going to kindergarten. So of course now you're into all the other kids have and I want, and it was just difficult to afford those things. So I decided it was time to close the shop and I would go back to work as a nurse, which I did. And then I started working in long-term care. I spent the rest of my nursing career working in long-term care, which I totally enjoyed. Till I retired, I spent 25 years as a assistant director of nursing, which was certainly a challenging job, but certainly a rewarding job. I remember when I was leaving to retire, I had quite a few of my residents say, "Oh, Karen, you can't go. What are we going to do without you?" And it really kind of broke my heart, but in the long run, I knew it was time. I spent 45 years in the career, and I knew it was time to end that career. So now, what do? I'm retired. I spend my time doing exactly what you see me doing now, stitching. Fortunately, I have a great husband who doesn't mind that I spend so much time stitching. He has his things he likes to do. I have my stitching, and we're just happy little I am so sorry I keep bumping that. But we are just happy little campers. So now you know pretty much about me. Not much else to tell other than that. We're probably Mr. and Mrs. No Life. Oh, that's funny. But that's what I jokingly call us. Now that I think about it, also had people ask about a pin stitch, which is what I'm doing now. And rest assured, folks, it is secure. It really doesn't come out. And the test of that is if you ever have to frog, you will be amazed at how difficult those two little tucks of a stitch are to get out of your fabric if you have to frog something. In fact, a lot of times, if that happens, what I end up doing is letting that pin stitch exactly where it is and just clipping off the thread as close to it as I can get, because I have a devil of a time getting them out. It just doesn't work. Where are we at? 30. Half hour. We'll go a little bit more yet. The other thing I thought I'd talk about is only because it just bothers me. I remember in the video I watched of the Crafty Curator and was one, and Ginger Gerald was another one who talked about pet peeves. And it isn't really a pet peeve, although it does I guess aggravate me just a little bit. And it's nobody's fault. It's not a stitcher's fault, this thing that bothers me. It's because the industry has called it that. And that is the word even weave. Now, some of you are thinking, why the world does that bother her? Well, if you think about the definition of an even weave, okay, if you need to look it up, look it up. But basically, the definition of an even weave is your fabric has the same amount of warp threads and weft threads, meaning you have the same number of threads going horizontally as you do vertically, so that if you stitch a 1-inch square on your fabric, you should have the same number of stitches horizontally as you do vertically. That is the definition of even weave. Okay? Now, what I go a little bit crazy about is the fact that the industry has divided fabric into groups of Aida cloth, linen, and even weave. Okay? So think about that definition. Even weave has the same number of threads horizontally as it does vertically. So, according to that definition, Aida cloth is an even weave. Linen is an even weave. Now, with linen, before people get a little nutsy cuckoo, yes, linen has fat threads and skinny threads. Granted. However, if you stitch that square, it's still going to be the same number of stitches horizontally as vertically, because those fat threads are going to compensate for those skinny threads. And it should come out to the same number of stitches in an inch in both directions, therefore making it even weave. Unless, however, it is otherwise stated. For example, Lakeside Linens now dyes a fabric, and I think it's called sesame seed, if I remember correctly, that is 50 count or 52 count in one direction and 60 count in another direction. Therefore, that is not an even weave, that's an uneven weave. So anything that has 5260 or what's another one? Stravhaven is another one, but I forget exactly the 36 by something else. But whatever that count says, if there's two numbers in that count, it's not even weave. If there's one number in that count, 14 count, 18 count, 20, 22, 25, 32, 36, 40, 55. It's an even weave. So Aida cloth is even weave. Linen is even weave. Your fabrics that are made out of blends, like cotton and I think it's modal. So those are fabrics like your Luganas, your Jobelins, your Jubilee, your Merino, Brittany. All of those fabrics that are, I always term them as man-made, for the simple reason that they are blends of other materials made into a fabric. Those are even weave. Needlepoint canvas is even weave. 18 count needlepoint canvas is considered an even weave by the definition. Now, what the industry, and I think the industry did this for lack of a better way to term it, called your group of what I term as man-mades, call those even weaves. I'm not sure why it was selected that it go that way, but I think that's the way that they have differentiated the fact that those are fabrics that are blends of materials. You know, to me, in my head and my way of thinking, and really, folks, this is just my opinion, and this is just the way I think. I'm not saying I'm right or that I'm wrong. I'm just saying this is the way I think about it and my opinion. I would have sooner seen everything called, everything that fits under the definition of even weave being termed even weave, and those fabrics that are manufactured out of blends and they don't have the slubs and they don't have the fat threads and the skinny threads the way linen does. I would have rather seen them just termed what they are. Okay, it's Lugana, it's Jobelin, it's Jubilee, it's, there's various and sundry fabrics out there, and those are the ones that come to mind quicker. But that's just something I cringe a little bit about when I hear that, and because I know that they're all even weave. So it's just my little thing that just sends a little ooh through me when I hear that. So, it is what it is. It's no stitcher's fault. I think that's how the industry managed it, and so be that. So we just live with it, or I just live with it. But what I do try to do is, educate some people, or educate people that let's look at what the definition really is. Let's look, let's look at it a little bit differently. So I'll get off my soapbox about that now. What can I say? So now that I think we're well past a half hour, I'm going to say goodbye for now. Thank you all for coming back to stitch with me. I enjoy this, and I enjoy stitching, and was really amazed at the number of people that subscribe to my channel, and I really thank you all for that, and I hope that each and every one of you had a great holiday season. Seems life has probably now settled down a little bit from all the hustle and bustle and rush of the holidays, and people can get back to their stitching and staying warm, and curling up with a nice piece of stitching and spending the time that they can. So I wish that all for you. People in the Northeast, God bless you all that are getting hit with all the snow and the floods and everything else. And my wish for you is please stay safe, stay warm, gather up that stitching, and somehow in all of that, find your joy, because really that's what stitching is all about for me, finding my joy. So I hope each of you can also find your joy in what you do. So with that, I will say goodbye until next time, and find your joy.